When your own child turns against you, the betrayal cuts deeper than any knife. But sometimes life gives you one last chance to rise, to fight back, and to rewrite the ending. Stay until the end to witness a mother's silent revenge that no courtroom could ever deliver. If you love stories where justice finds its way home, make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell. You won't want to miss what happens next. My name is Eleanor Grant, and at 72, I never imagined I'd be digging through trash just to stay alive. 6 weeks ago, I was a homeowner, a mother, a widow with a quiet routine. Today, I'm invisible, a forgotten old woman collecting cans for pennies. The day everything fell apart is burned into my memory. Inside the courthouse, my only son, David, stood across from me with eyes colder than I'd ever seen. "You don't deserve anything, you selfish old woman," he said in a calm, practiced tone. Beside him, his wife Vanessa crossed her arms, that small, victorious smirk on her lips. 3 lawyers flipped their papers like they were signing away a stranger's fate. They won. I lost everything. The house where I raised David, my life savings, my retirement fund, all transferred to his name with a judge's stroke of a pen. I walked out into the autumn air with nowhere to go, no home, no plan, just an old purse and the last shreds of who I used to be. That night, I slept on a park bench, and then another, and another. Friends stopped answering. People averted their eyes when I passed. The woman who once hosted family dinners was now a ghost in her own town. 6 weeks later, while crouched behind a dumpster picking aluminum cans with trembling hands, a man in a tailored black suit approached me. "Grant?" he asked, looking me directly in the eyes, something no one had done in weeks. I froze. "Yes," I whispered. "My name is Daniel Reeves. I'm an attorney. I've been searching for you for 3 weeks. Your brother passed away 2 months ago. He left you something." I almost laughed. What could he possibly leave me? A dusty photograph? But when Daniel handed me the sealed envelope, my heart pounded. Inside was a letter in my brother Mark's handwriting, that familiar, slanted script I hadn't seen in 15 years. We'd had a terrible fight long ago, and he disappeared from my life. But now, his words reached me from beyond the grave. "Eleanor, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I never forgot you. I followed your life from afar. I know what David did to you. I couldn't stop it in time, but I can give you a way to take your life back. I'm leaving you everything I own. A mansion worth $3 million and $20 million in cash and investments. But there's one condition." My hands shook. $20 million. A mansion. It felt unreal. You must live in the mansion for 90 days without leaving. During that time, you must uncover and document the full truth of what David did to you. Every lie, every signature, every betrayal. If you refuse, the inheritance goes to charity. No exceptions. For the first time in weeks, something flickered inside me. Not hope exactly, but possibility. My brother wasn't just handing me money. He was giving me a chance to stand up. Daniel helped me into his car. I clutched my torn bag of cans as if to remind myself where I'd been. As the city blocks passed by, the broken sidewalks faded into green lawns and iron gates. And then I saw it. Mark's mansion. 3 stories of pale stone, carved doors, fountains in the front garden. It was breathtaking, intimidating, surreal. Inside, everything was pristine. Chandeliers, marble floors, libraries, rooms that smelled like new beginnings. Daniel handed me a heavy set of keys and led me to Mark's study on the 2nd floor. Behind a polished desk was a built-in safe. Inside, Daniel explained, is everything the investigators collected before your brother passed. Documents, recordings, proof. Your job is to understand what happened and decide what to do with it. Before leaving, he added one final blow. Your son already knows about the inheritance. He's filed a lawsuit to contest the will. He claims your brother was mentally incapacitated. My blood ran cold. Of course, David would try to steal this too. That night, after the first real meal and hot shower I'd had in weeks, I stood before the safe. 6 digits, handwritten by Mark. My hand hovered over the dial. I wasn't just opening a door. I was opening the truth. The next morning, sunlight poured through the tall windows as I dialed the combination. Click. Inside, folders upon folders. The first contained copies of the documents David had me sign. I read slowly, and my stomach knotted. Hidden clauses. Fine print. Legal traps I never saw coming. I hadn't given him power of attorney out of kindness. I'd unknowingly handed over my house and accounts. The second folder held photographs. David and Vanessa at an expensive restaurant, celebrating 2 days after I signed. Toasting with wine glasses. My ruin was their victory dinner. Then came the recordings. David's voice on the phone. It has to look legal. She can't suspect anything. Make the papers confusing but valid. She'll sign. She always does. My knees nearly gave out. My own son, plotting my downfall like a stranger. And then Vanessa's voice. That old woman has too much. The house, the money, it should be ours. Her time is over. I pressed stop. The pain was sharp, almost physical. But I kept reading, listening, uncovering. Every file was another knife in the back. Witness statements. Paid evaluations. False claims of my mental incompetence. All orchestrated to strip me of everything. Then the doorbell rang. I peered through the peephole. David and Vanessa, dressed to perfection, standing outside like predators who smelled blood. I know you're in there, Mom. Open the door, David said, his voice icy. I'm not opening it, I replied firmly. This is ridiculous, Vanessa snapped. That inheritance isn't yours. You have no right to be here. I have every right, I said. My brother left it to me. Legally. David's tone sharpened. If you think you're keeping it, you're delusional. I've already filed my lawsuit. When I win, I'll kick you out just like I did before. His words sliced through me, but this time I didn't break, because now I had something he didn't know existed. The truth. Go away, David, I said steadily. You're not taking anything else from me, ever again. They left. For now. I returned to the study, surrounded by folders, recordings, and proof. But something in me had shifted. This wasn't just pain anymore. It was clarity. The woman who walked into that courthouse broken was gone. Someone new was waking up. The next days passed like chapters of a book I didn't know I was brave enough to write. Each morning, I brewed coffee in the mansion's kitchen, climbed the stairs to the study, and opened another folder. Each one peeled back a layer of betrayal. By the end of the week, I knew every document by heart. But Mark had left more than just legal proof. Hidden in the back of the safe was a small wooden box. Inside were dozens of letters, all from him, written over the last 15 years, never sent. Eleanor, I've wanted to call you 1,000 times, but my pride always wins. I followed your life from afar. When I saw how David treated you, I worried. I saw the signs. I wish I'd warned you sooner. You've always been the strongest person I know. Don't forget that. Tears blurred the ink as I read each one. My brother had watched silently as my life crumbled, powerless to intervene. But he left me this. His belief in me when I had none in myself. And in his final letter, written 2 weeks before his death, he wrote, "You will face a choice, Eleanor. Revenge or justice. Revenge destroys. Justice restores. Choose wisely." I sat with that sentence for a long time. Revenge would be satisfying, yes. To destroy David legally, to see him humiliated, to make Vanessa lose everything she schemed for. But justice. Justice meant reclaiming my dignity, not losing myself to hatred. I knew what I had to do. Not scream, not beg. Strategize. I spent the next week creating a master file, meticulously labeled folders, highlighted clauses, organized recordings, timelines of their actions. Daniel came by every few days to check in, and when he saw the work I'd done, he nodded in quiet admiration. "You're not just surviving," he said. "You're building a case that could bury him." But that wasn't my goal, not entirely. I told Daniel my plan. I wanted a face-to-face confrontation. Not in court, not through lawyers, but across a table with witnesses, legal presence, and irrefutable evidence laid bare. I wanted David to look me in the eyes and hear the truth from my mouth. Daniel agreed. He brought in Clara Davis, a sharp, composed lawyer who specialized in elder financial abuse. Her presence alone commanded respect. We scheduled the meeting in the mansion's grand dining room. I wore one of Mark's late wife's simple but elegant dresses, styled my hair, and stood tall in front of the mirror. For the first time in months, I looked like myself again, the woman who once carried a family on her back. At exactly 10:00 a.m., the doorbell rang. David walked in first, arrogance in every step. Vanessa followed, wearing a blazer that screamed money, not remorse. Two lawyers trailed behind them, the same men who had watched me lose everything in that courtroom. "I see you've made yourself comfortable in your new palace," David sneered. "Enjoying money that doesn't belong to you?" I didn't rise to the bait. I simply gestured for them to sit. On my side of the table sat Daniel, Clara, a notary public, and my evidence. "Thank you for coming," I said calmly. "I asked you here to show you something." "I don't need to see anything," David interrupted, waving a hand. "My lawyers already have everything they need to tear that will apart." I didn't flinch. "David, for once in your life, you're going to listen." Vanessa laughed. "Who do you think you are, Eleanor?" "You're a homeless old woman who got lucky." "You're right," I replied, locking eyes with her. "I was homeless. Because your husband put me there. But luck had nothing to do with what happens next." Daniel slid the first set of papers across the table, copies of the documents David made me sign. "These," Clara said coldly, "are the legal instruments David Hayes used to strip his mother of her home and assets. They contain hidden clauses, deceptive language, and were drafted by lawyers paid to bypass ethical standards." David barely glanced at them. "She signed voluntarily." "Voluntarily?" I leaned forward. "You lied to me. You told me it was for my protection. You let me believe I was securing my future when I was actually signing it away." "You planned it, David. I have the proof." Daniel pressed play on the recorder. David's own voice filled the room. "It has to look legal. She can't suspect anything. Make it confusing but valid. She'll sign." "She always does." The silence afterward was deafening. David's face paled. Vanessa's smirk disappeared. Clara continued, "We also have evidence of your gambling debts, Mr. Combling." Hayes, over $200,000. Photographs of meetings with loan sharks. Financial records showing large withdrawals immediately after the property transfer. And evidence Vanessa spent thousands on luxury items purchased with funds that didn't belong to you. I slid photographs across the table. David and the lawyers in secret meetings, David at a casino, Vanessa at a designer boutique. "You left me on the street," I said softly, looking my son straight in the eyes. "Your own mother. I trusted you. I raised you alone after your father died. I worked for decades to give you a life. And you repaid me with betrayal." For the first time, his bravado cracked. "I didn't want you to end up like that. I thought you'd find somewhere else." "You thought wrong," I said. "I called everyone. No one came. I was cold, hungry, and invisible while you toasted my downfall." I stood slowly, voice steady. "Here's what happens next. You have two choices. You can sign a full confession, return what you stole, and publicly admit the truth. Or I will file criminal charges: fraud, elder financial abuse, forgery, bribery. I will take this to court and make sure you face prison. You and Vanessa both." His lawyers exchanged panicked looks. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably, crossing her arms tighter. David swallowed hard. "How long do I have?" 72 hours, Daniel replied. "After that, the evidence goes to the district attorney." They left in silence. But before he stepped out, David turned and looked at me. His face wasn't arrogant anymore. It was uncertain. For the first time, I saw a crack in his armor. The following 3 days were the longest of my life. Every hour crawled by. I walked through Mark's garden, reread his letters, stared at the clock. My resolve didn't waver, but my heart ached with a truth I couldn't escape. No matter what happened, David was still my son. Then, on the third afternoon, Daniel called. David's lawyer sent an email. He wants to meet. Alone. No lawyers. Just you and him. My pulse quickened. A private conversation. Dangerous, but maybe necessary. We agreed to meet at 4:00 p.m. Daniel stayed nearby in the study while David entered the living room alone. No Vanessa, no legal entourage. Just a tired, hollow man. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he exhaled. "I don't know where to start, Mom." "Start with the truth," I said simply. And for the first time since that horrible day in court, he did. The words poured out like water from a broken dam. His debts, his fear, the threats from loan sharks, Vanessa's role in the scheme. How he justified it all by convincing himself I didn't need what I had. "I told myself you'd be fine," he said through tears. "I made you the enemy because it was the only way I could live with what I was doing." His honesty hit me like a wave. Not because it excused him, it didn't, but because I finally saw the human behind the betrayal. The broken boy I raised, buried beneath greed and fear. "I'm going to sign the confession," David said finally. "I'll return everything. I'll make it public. And then I'll leave your life. You don't owe me forgiveness." "That's not for you to decide," I replied firmly. "You'll do what justice demands. Forgiveness, if it ever comes, will be on my terms." He nodded, wiping his face. "When do we sign?" "Tomorrow at 10, I said. "Here. With witnesses." The next morning, the house felt strange, quiet, expectant, like it knew 2 lives were about to pivot. At 10 o'clock sharp, David arrived. No Vanessa, no entourage, just my son in a wrinkled shirt and the kind of eyes you get when the story you told yourself finally collapses under its own lies. Daniel greeted him in the foyer and led him to the dining room, now transformed into a clean stage for truth, a long table, a notary at one end, Clara Davis seated beside neat stacks of documents, and a small recorder blinking red. We didn't exchange pleasantries. This wasn't a family reunion. This was a reckoning conducted with steady hands. "You've read everything," Clara said, tapping the first page. "This is a full confession and admission of elder financial abuse and fraud with an agreed civil remedy. You'll return all assets and make a public statement. If you breach, Mrs. Turn. Grant reserves the right to pursue criminal charges without further notice. Understood?" David nodded. His signature, once the weapon that emptied my life, now became the instrument that began to restore it. He signed the confession. He signed the deed transfer for my home. He signed the financial remittance. He signed until the stack was complete and there was nothing left to sign, only the truth, inked and irreversible. Ski-kerpti. We went straight to the bank. The sterile brightness, the murmur of counting machines, the smell of copy paper. It all felt absurdly normal for a moment, so extraordinary. On a flat screen at the counter, numbers gathered like birds returning home, 350,000 wired back into my account. I stared as the balance updated, a quiet beeping marking the end of a long winter. David's hands shook as he approved the last transfer. When it was done, he looked at me. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said. But I wanted to stop the bleeding. "You stocked it," I answered. "Now you have to heal what you can on your side." Outside, the wind blew across the pavement, soft and cool, carrying the smell of rain. He offered a tentative goodbye. I didn't touch him, didn't promise anything I couldn't yet give. He left without turning back, as if he knew there are days you can't fix with an apology. You can only step outside them and begin again somewhere else. Ski-kerpt. In the weeks that followed, the mansion changed the way light changes a room, slowly, then all at once. I opened windows. I moved chairs so conversations would face the garden instead of the door. I stocked the refrigerator. I put flowers in a chipped vase Mark had tucked away in a guest room closet. Peonies, generous and soft, like the hug we never got to have before he died. I began to paint again, clumsy at first, then freer. The sweep of a lake at dusk, a hand folded around another, a door swinging open just enough to let morning in. I didn't go back to the little house that used to be mine. I rented it to a young family with 2 children who drew chalk rainbows on the steps and watered my old geraniums with cups because the watering can was too heavy. Sometimes I drove by slowly, and the sight of a tricycle on the lawn felt like a prayer answered. That house wanted to be full of beginnings. I could honor that without living inside it. Out of the quiet that followed the storm, the work appeared, clear and insistent. With Daniel's guidance and a slice of my brother's inheritance, I founded New Beginnings, a small program for older women who had been stripped by family or trusted hands. We set up a hotline and a legal clinic in the city, partnered with counselors, and found a string of apartments to serve as short-term housing. The first to come was Velma, 70 years old and angry at herself for being fooled. She brought a canvas tote and a folder of forms. We gave her tea and time, and a lawyer who would not let go. The day she moved into her own place, she handed me back the spare key, and her hands didn't tremble anymore. Then there was Maria, whose son-in-law had convinced her to streamline her accounts. Streamline was the word he used, like she was a crowded drawer to be organized and not a woman with a life. And Lydia, who had believed a nephew's story about temporary guardianship. We sat at round tables with pens and sticky notes and watched women unspool shame from their bodies like thread they'd never needed to carry. When the checks returned, when the deeds reversed, when their names slid back into the places where they'd always belonged, we didn't celebrate with champagne. We celebrated with keys placed gently on open palms. "Here," we said. "Open the door." 6 months after the confrontation, a letter arrived by certified mail. The envelope was thick, embossed with the name of a law firm I didn't recognize. I carried it to the garden and sat on Mark's bench, the one with the brass plaque that whispered to me whenever I doubted. The letter explained that my brother had left a postscript clause to be revealed only after 6 months. If I had honored the condition on the inheritance and pursued justice without gratuitous destruction. If I had practiced restraint in the face of wrath. Inside was a small key and a note in Mark's handwriting, slanted and sure, filled with the voice of the boy who used to ask me to check under the bed for monsters. "Eleanor, if you have this, it means you chose the narrower road. I'm proud of you. This key is for a safe deposit box at the central bank. There's one last gift there, not because you need more, but because love keeps accounts differently than money does. Go see. Use it well, live well." I went the next morning. The banker escorted me to a quiet room and set the box on a felt pad. The key fit with a soft click. Inside was a leather folder, a flash drive, and a small velvet pouch. The folder contained a letter and notarized papers establishing a trust funds earmarked specifically for New Beginnings, structured to grow, governed so that no one, not even me, could redirect them away from the women they were meant to serve. The flash drive held a library of recorded interviews Mark had done with advocacy experts and caseworkers, his blueprint for the work he hoped I would do. And the velvet pouch? A delicate gold locket with 2 tiny photographs, one of us as kids on the front stoop with summer hair and skin knees, and one of me holding baby David, my face open and lit with every hope I had for him. I wept, not the broken sobs of loss, but the aching release kind that says, "I see you." I was seen. I took the locket home and placed it beside the vase of peonies. When the afternoon sun hit that table, it glowed like a small coin of forgiveness. David wrote once a month, not long missives, no pleas. Short updates, like inventory taken by a man who finally learned how to keep honest books. He'd joined a support group. He met with a counselor twice a week. He'd taken an entry-level job and was paying back everyone he owed. He and Vanessa had separated. Luxury rarely survives without a host. Did I miss him? Sometimes. Memory isn't a filing cabinet, it's a tide. Some mornings, an old Christmas would wash up David on the floor, paper crowns slipping off his head, laughing with his father while I watched, soft and full. Some evenings, the hearing would flicker across the wall, and the sentence, "You don't deserve anything," would hover like a neon sign. On those nights, I pressed the locket into my palm and remembered both photographs, because love requires a whole ledger, not just the entries that prove a point. Ski-Kerpt one crisp evening, I hosted a small supper in the mansion's kitchen for the women from our newest cohort. We passed around a basket of warm rolls and told the kind of stories that end with, and then I realized I had my life back, and I had no idea where to put it. Laughter rose and settled. In the pause that followed, Velma asked the question I'd been circling for months. "Are you going to forgive him?" Silence has a sound, if you listen closely. I let mine speak first. The refrigerator hummed. A fork chimed against a plate. "I don't think forgiveness is a door you fling open, not after this," I said finally. "It's more like a window you crack so the air can change without blowing your papers across the room." I can tell you this, I'm not planning a prison for him inside my chest. That's all the forgiveness I know how to hold today. Tomorrow might be bigger. They nodded, each of them measuring my words against their own weather. Later that night, I walked to the garden bench, the sky a scatter of silver. I thought of Mark, how he had known to design a path that forced me to look long and hard at the truth, that insisted I choose between fire that destroys and fire that refines. I traced the engraved letters of my name on the plaque, the sister who taught me the meaning of sacrifice, and whispered into the dark, "I hope I've learned the meaning of return." The next morning, I drafted a public statement for New Beginnings, crediting my brother's trust, outlining our process, and naming the mission with a clarity I hadn't found before, to restore what can be counted and what can only be carried. I signed it, and as the press release went out, I felt a quiet current move beneath my feet, purpose settling in like a foundation you don't see but stand on every day. A week later, I received an email from David. He'd been asked to speak at his group about accountability. "They said I don't have to tell my whole story," he wrote, "but I think I do. I think I should say the part where I made my mother homeless and then watched TV in her living room like the world hadn't changed. I think the people in that room deserve the whole weight of what I did. And maybe I do too." I read the message twice, then moved it to a folder labeled "In Progress." Forgiveness, window cracked. On the anniversary of the day Daniel found me by the dumpster, I painted one last canvas, a woman's hands anchoring a sheet of paper while the wind tried to lift it, a desk by a tall window, a bench under a tree, the suggestion of a boy in the background, the boy he had been, blurred enough to be every son, every daughter. When the painting dried, I hung it in the entryway where anyone who walked in would see it first, a ledger of losses rewritten. An accounting made right. If you've listened to my story this far, carry this with you. What was taken from you does not define you. The silence that followed does not define you. The night you learned to say enough does not define you. What defines you is the way you rise and the way you refuse to burn the village to prove the fire is real. Choose justice that restores. Choose boundaries that hold. Choose a life that blooms again and again, even after frost. And if you ever find yourself alone on a cold bench with nothing but a torn bag of cans and a name you're not sure belongs to you anymore, remember this. Somewhere, a door is still yours to open. The key might be love or law or the stubborn belief that you are not finished. Find the door, turn the key. Step through. If this story moved you, if you want more real, raw tales where the elders rise with dignity and justice finds its way home, like this video, subscribe, and ring the bell. Share it with someone who needs to remember their strength. Your support helps us tell more stories like Eleanor's, and it helps real women write their next chapter. Stay with us. The next story begins where the last one refuses to end.